Well, let's talk about the gig on Saturday night, Art. Who will you have with you?
Dan Schulte's playing bass, and Jonas Oglesby is playing drums. We've been together for on and off for about 4 years.
Have you played with Dan before?
Oh yeah, I've been here for 20 years,
Yeah.
and he was one of the first bass players I ever played with here.
What do you like about him?
He's got good time. He's willing to play my music, and I like him as a person.
Interesting cat, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. What will you be doing? All of your own material, or are you going to be doing some other stuff?
We do mostly my material. I mean, I have like probably 150 tunes, so we obviously don't get to play them all, you know, over a period of time. But a lot of them I wrote in the past, you know, like from the 70s and 80s, and people are finding them pretty fresh. And I started transcribing them with my computer when I had a serious surgery on my shoulder and I couldn't play or do anything for a year. And that's when I decided to start trying to play with the trio here.
What was it like having to come back from that?
Hard.
Yeah.
It took a year of physical therapy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sculpt, you paint, you play jazz, you write classical music. What did you get up and do today?
I got up, I exercised, I had my morning coffee first, and breakfast, and then I exercised. I practiced for a little while.
On the piano?
On the piano.
Okay. Well, you could practice painting.
Yeah. No, I don't paint. I'm a photographer.
A photographer, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I took the dog to the park, let her run around a little bit, came back, did a little more practicing, had some lunch, and you arrived.
How do you practice? What is your practice like?
Well, right now I'm practicing for the gig.
Yeah.
So I'm going over. Believe it or not, the tunes I write are difficult enough, even for me. So yeah, I have to stay really on top of it. I probably practice, you know, the tunes more than anybody else does in the band.
Really?
And because it's like a tennis player, you know, I want them to sound effortless, and it takes. So that's what I do. Like right now, I'm going over the newer. The other thing we do is we don't play the same tunes, you know, at the same gig. Like we played at Ivory's in February, so I'm presenting probably 8 new tunes that nobody's heard at Ivory's before. And so, you know, I'm learning my own tune, so to speak. And the interesting thing for me is that each time I approach this, like lay off of them for a while, because when I don't have a gig, I'm working on my classical stuff. I have a piano piece that's going to be played in July by someone else, but I'm learning it. I actually can't play my own classical music most of the time.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
Why is that?
It's just the way it comes. Because I'm outside of the fact that I actually studied classical music and got a degree in it, performance. It was way too hard for me to work up a piece. I just never. I love the music. I draw from it, even in my jazz playing and in my jazz writing. But I definitely couldn't be a.
So you don't really hear it in full flower until someone performs it in front of you.
The classical music you're
Yeah.
talking about specifically? Well, I hear it because of the notation system I have on my computer, which plays it back for me. I hear it that way.
Yeah.
But I don't hear it live. You know. But I'm learning this one piece because it's for the what they call the International Piano Festival, and there's a section of it where the more advanced students in Oregon are playing. So this is a piece I wrote for a student who will wind up being able to play it better than I can. And so I figured, gee, I've got to really learn this piece, because if I'm going to have a head-to-head with a student and his teacher at some point before that, I'd like to be able to play it.
Do you really differentiate in your mind between your classical compositions and your jazz compositions?
Only in that when I'm writing something in jazz, I'm actually hearing jazz.
Uh-huh.
And the differentiation would be that for me, most of the time, jazz is a little more harmonic. I mean, I tend to follow, even though the harmonic ideas that I have aren't predicated on bebop, you know, per se, or anything else like any modern writer. They're still within, we still have changes to play in most of the tunes, and form, a certain form. I'm not doing free jazz or anything, so that's one thing. But when I write classical music, I'm totally free. I write based more on a thematic idea that I expand on. Whether and a lot of my stuff sounds you know, harmonic. I'm using the word loosely here.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is atonal, and some of it's even bitonal.
So, but there certainly are jazz players who play in that vein.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So why isn't their stuff classical? I mean, that's what you know, those terms, classical and jazz, certainly have been, you know, have been combined a lot, you know, over the years, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm actually, I'd have to say the way I write for myself, for performing myself, say in a trio, or I've had a quartet. I'm currently getting ready to put a quartet together.
Yeah.
The stuff I write for that, I don't think that there's any real definition for it. I mean, it kind of swings. Some of it, you know, some of it, but it could be like I've got tunes that are kind of funk oriented. I have tunes that have more harmony. I have tunes that have no harmony. You know, it's all over the place. So I think trying to put labels on the music in general, I mean, other than, as I say, the fact that jazz happens in jazz clubs and people have a certain idea when they hear the word jazz. Most of the time, a person that hears the word jazz wouldn't imagine my kind of music. They would imagine whatever they're used to hearing, which often would be, especially if they're not hardcore jazz fans, they would be thinking in terms of, you know, what bebop sounds like, or just post-bebop.
Okay, so in your photography and your fine art and your music, in the creative process, in that moment of the creative process, I know the work is different, but what is your mindset different in each of those media?
Not really. No, that's an interesting question, because I've been thinking about this for about 50 years now. You know, this idea of where creativity comes from, and where even my personal inspiration comes from, and I realize I've drawn from all these different life experiences and from all the musically from all the musicians, but I also feel like there's an essence, a core principles that apply no matter what the vehicle or form is that you're creating in. Now, technically speaking, for instance, I do the sculpture I do is welded sculpture, and I had to learn how to weld. Well, I've never been and never would be a great welder, so I had to work within those means. But where the imagination comes from and so forth, it's almost like, not to get too spiritual on you, but when I feel inspired, it's like my mind goes away and I'm channeling something. You know, I'll hear a melody, and maybe I'll intellectually work on that melody or try to get it to go a certain way, but I don't have a mathematical formula or any way that I approach it other than, does this sound good? And whatever makes it sound good is whatever makes my original music sound creative. Did that make any sense?
That's good.